Imagine being out in the middle of nowhere and stumbling across something you knew was going to make you very rich. We'll talk about it coming up on Ghost Towns and More. Our story takes us to one of the most unlikely places in a remote corner of southwestern Utah. In 1875, a couple of young prospectors named James Ryan and Samuel Hawks were camped near the southern tip of the San Francisco Mountains. One day, they walked past a rock ledge that caught their attention, and they decided to chip off a piece of it. They couldn't believe their eyes when they found a rich vein of silver-bearing galena. So they hurried and staked a mining claim and started digging, but only tunneled in about 25 feet. Now back then, miners often didn't know how far an ore vein would last. And when Ryan and Hawks were offered $25,000 for their find, or about $650,000 in today's money, they thought they better sell while the getting was good. The new owners bought the mine and named it the Horn Silver Mine, then turned around and sold it 3 years later for a handsome $5 million. The third group of buyers or investors could see the potential for a large find and even more profitability if they could persuade the Utah Southern Railroad to extend its tracks further south to the nearby town of Milford, then have a spur extend up into the new mine site. Almost overnight, the new town of Frisco sprang up with people and merchants flocking to the area by the hundreds. Soon more mines were opened and smelters with charcoal kilns for hot smelting were constructed nearby. Soon there were a lot of stores, saloons, restaurants, a hotel, school, and even a hospital. And when the railroad arrived in 1880, it brought with it the riffraff, turning the town into one of those typical mining towns with brothels and troublemakers. The biggest problem facing the town of Frisco was the lack of water, so fresh water had to be shipped in and was sold door to door. The shortage of water gave merchants all the reasons they needed to build 23 saloons to wash down the dust. Lawlessness became the next worst problem for the town. There were so many fights with rowdy gunslingers it became known as the wildest town in the West. One writer described it as the Dodge City, Tombstone, and Sodom and Gomorrah all rolled into one. So many people were being shot and killed each night that undertakers in town had a booming business of their own, making daily rounds picking up bodies and hauling them to the nearby cemetery. Managers of Frisco finally had enough of all the killing and illegal activity and hired Marshall Pearson from Pioche, Nevada to come help clean up the town. Now, when Marshall Pearson arrived, he had no plans to build a jail. He said, "I'm giving lawbreakers two choices, get out or get shot." Well, no one took him seriously until he shot and killed 6 men the first night. Things went much better after that. During the peak years of Frisco, between 1880 and 1885, the population here was over 6,000. Looking at the site today, it's hard to even imagine that there were that many people with the dozens of buildings that once covered this area. One day, a couple of young boys who worked in the mine wanted to impress their girlfriends and decided to sneak 4 of those girls into the mine for a private tour. When they got several hundred feet below ground, a portion of the mine caved in and the 6 teenagers were trapped for over 16 hours until workers got them free. Over a 10-year span, the Horn Silver Mine produced $54 million in ores. But those profits came at a price. Temperatures underground at the 900-foot level were so hot it was making the miners sick. Even the water being pumped out of the mines was too hot to touch, and many miners lost their health due to poor working conditions. On the morning of February 12, 1885, workers from the night shift had just come out the elevator shaft from the mine. The foreman was just about to lower the next crew of workers down the mine when he felt the ground beneath him start to shake. He told the workers to wait a few minutes. Then, without warning, a thundering roar with the intensity of an earthquake hit, with the entire mine collapsing from the bottom up, and the tremors were so strong from the cave-in that it broke windows in homes in Milford, just 15 miles away. The collapse of the mine spelled the end of the heydays for Frisco. As fast as workers originally came in, they began to leave in droves. Mine owners tried to salvage what they could of the operation, and although they drilled down another shaft, the mine would never again become what it once was. In 1894, a fire destroyed most of the mine operations and added another fatal blow to the survival of the town. A few people stayed on as the town dwindled and buildings became vacant. Some mining operation continued on a smaller scale and did okay, producing another 20 million in ores by 1913. But by 1920, the town finally became a ghost. Many of the buildings were either torn down or moved away, and today the only remains are some mining sheds, some charcoal kilns, and a few crumbling foundations, as well as an overgrown cemetery where many of the graves are unmarked.